What up everybody, TheDungeonMattster back with another video. Today I'm going to show you how I turned some dollar store foam core and some balsa wood into this. Stick around. So I decided to make the walls of my house from foam core instead of XPS. This was actually the third attempt at making the house. As I had been extremely unhappy with the first two attempts, I actually wasted a whole day's worth of crafting on two failed attempts making this house because I've never actually done anything to this scale before. And eventually I settled on making some plans, well, more just a floor plan, in order to show myself the layout of the house to be consistent with each layer. It was easier for me to do it that way than to try to do it freehand. In the end, that proved to be the best method for me to accomplish this. And I went a little shorter on my walls, so those sections that you see there are about 2.5 inches tall, and then I ripped them down to length as needed. This is for the base, for the foundation of the house. I decided to just rip down a piece of XPS foam. It's about 5 by 7 or 6.5 by 7. I can't remember exactly, but to add a 1/2 inch to the width of overall width of the house, and you'll see that as I lay it out. It adds a front porch to the front of the house. And the main portion of the house itself was 5 by 7. And to account for the overall width of the house, a piece of ready board from Dollar Tree is 3/16 of an inch thick. So if you put two of them together, it's 6/16 or 3/8 of an inch. So if you measure 3/8 of an inch less on the center wall, or in this case the short edge of the house, you'll end up with your exact measurement by the time you're done. There you can see I was plunge cutting some windows with my X-Acto blade, and I'm just going to glue everything together with hot glue. It's faster, and I'm going to put a facade on the outside of the house, so I didn't have to wait for PVA glue to dry at this stage. And I keep putting things together and test fitting at almost every stage of the process. I measured a section of foam core that was 1/4 inch bigger on all sides, plus an additional 1/2 inch on the front for the, or an inch on the front, excuse me, to account for the porch that's going to be beneath it, so I can put some railings on later. Now I'm going to take some time to texture the top side here. I started just wanting to do the porch. But later on I ended up covering the whole thing with this, and I just used a ballpoint pen to draw in the lines for my my planks and such, and the cobblestone on the bottom side here sped up for your convenience. And I poked in nail holes in the planks using the pen, and then I went over the planks with a wire brush. This was probably the most tedious part, was drawing all of these things on all the various pieces, because I did wood texture as well on other pieces later on, and that added to the time that this took. And next I'm gluing up the kind of the front stairwell, bell tower I want to call it, but it's not really bell tower. I don't know anything about houses really, so I don't know what this would be called, but I saw the model for this house was I based it on a picture of an old Victorian house. So I don't quite know what this would be called, but it goes up the front of the house and ends in like a steeple. Cutting out the windows, I saved a lot of time doing that by just reusing the initial patterns that I cut out from my initial measurements. It saved a lot of time. Just make sure you use the original to make the copies so that the measurements don't degrade over time. Repeat the same thing on the second level. And third level. And next I'm going to have a raised portion of the roof just off towards the back. I guess it would be called, if I'm not mistaken, the Widow's Walk. It would be where the women left behind in times of war would wait for their men to come back by, walking the top of their house in that very depressing kind of Gothic way, where people didn't tend to live much past 35 or 40. And now I'm just going to do a lot of beveled cuts with my knife in order to make all these pieces fit together. They're not exact, it's not mathematically sound, but it will work. And since we're going to cover most of this with wood and other trim later on, this won't make much of a difference as long as the overall shape is there. And I'm just going to repeat the wood texture on the flat portions of the upper roof. I'm drawing in a little trap door on this floor, and on the lower floors I'll add some stairs later to show a transition between floors so it makes a little bit more sense to the eye when you take the floors apart. Thing's gonna look awesome when it's painted. I had to use a smaller puncher here to put the nail heads in. I ended up going with one of my clay modeling tools. It works perfectly. It's like a big needle on the end of a stylus, so it's really easy to work with, but my hands were pretty cramped after doing this project. This was a lot of small detail work. And this is the roof on top of the first floor. I just repeated the same wood texture on that. And now we're going to make some smaller angled windows, some box windows on the lower floor. Another feature that I saw on the Victorian house that I was looking at. It looks really distinctive of that style, that time period. And I really tried hard to capture that, but I don't think I came quite close enough. I'm going to make another attempt at a later point, but these came out pretty good despite that. Laying them on the cardstock to make the top and bottom made this a little bit quicker than trying to cut the angles out of the foam core, and it saved me from having to cover that as trim later on. These little pieces of foam core in the center where the windows are, though, they were very fragile, so I had to be very careful when manipulating them until everything was glued together because they were fragile and they'd break apart. I made the window just a little too wide, so I had to come back in afterwards and trim it up. I did just glue it and cut the next one, trim out the excess from the other window, and kind of just butt them up against each other, and that worked well enough. It covered the accident of having glued the other one down too soon without making both of them together to cut before gluing. But this door was something that I had made a long time ago while I was bored. I was just sitting at my desk doing something, and I was going to at one point take a mold of it so I could keep recasting it, but I thought it would be perfect for the front of this, so I decided to just take it and glue it on. And if you guys want to see how I made that, I'll post a link at some point to another video that I haven't made yet. Now I start cutting out a shit ton of planks from balsa, and just like in the last video, I started running out of the small pieces. I never seem to buy enough of the small pieces, so I decided from now on I'm just going to use my balsa splitter that I made to split down my own from the larger pieces, since the larger pieces are pretty huge and fairly inexpensive. I think I got a 4x36 sheet for about $6, and then I ripped it down into at least twice that value of the smaller pieces if you were to buy them separately. And here my balsa chopper makes another appearance. I love this thing. As you can see, I left this clip intact so you could see how fast I could go through them. And now I'm just cutting out, using those cut out 2.5-inch sections and just gluing them everywhere until I felt happy with how it looked without crowding it, without putting it where it wouldn't make total sense. It still has kind of a animated, almost cartoonish look to the house, but I kind of like that, so I'm rolling with it. It was a little tricky to get into some of the smaller spaces, but well worth the effort and time to take the time to do it than to look at it later after it's all painted and say, shit, I should have done that, I should have done that. I'm doing it all right now. I'm covering the edges of the foam core using the same size planks. It's 3/8 of an inch, I believe, and about 1/16 of an inch thick. I'm just doing simple push cuts with my X-Acto blade to make sure the boards split without shredding. So I get a nice clean cut, and then I'm gluing them on with hot glue. Very simple. Anytime I have to do an angle, I lay it over, like you can see there, and score it with my knife, and then I take it off, cut it, and put it back, and it fits generally exactly where I want it. And now I'm going to make a smaller 1-inch section for the top of the, I guess I'll just still call it the bell tower or the staircase, or... And this is where a little pair of flush cutters can come in handy, is when I started getting up to the tops of these, I could just snip off the balsa wood because it breaks so easily. And no problem, it would sure as hell come right off, and I wouldn't have to worry about cutting myself or cutting into my foam. I'm just going to use some toothpicks or half toothpicks to make some fencing around the upper levels. It could look like a kind of a wrought iron thing. I don't have a pattern for that necessarily. I'm going to come back later and experiment, maybe put some granny grating around the inside of that to make it kind of look like it. And I've debated whether or not to do windows in the inside of the window slots. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, if I should do windows, with cross braces and stuff, or if I should just leave them open like that. I'm repeating the same fencing process on the the larger level. And again, more wood flashing to go around. And now I wanted to kind of have a portion of the roof that was kind of like the eave, the overhang, that kind of thing. And also I wanted to incorporate that in with the second floor to be able to make the second floor stable so that it wouldn't just slide off the top. So when you put it on, it would kind of snap into place. So I decided to trace the outline of the profile of the second floor with balsa wood, and it worked perfectly. I cut out a 1x2 and a 2x2 piece of XPS foam and glued them together. Textured them up with a foam ball, or foil ball, excuse me, and then drew a cobblestone pattern on them for the stairs for the front of the foundation. A little bit of hot glue, which kind of did melt the foam just a little bit, but it's okay because it's kind of obscured by the wood texture, the planking. And here I did the same thing, just with a thinner piece. I cut out a section of roof, roughly 1 inch by 3/4 of an inch. It had to be just slightly larger in order to accommodate for the angle of putting it in. So it's about 1 inch by 3/4 of an inch. I cut out the top of this piece of 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch XPS foam with a X-Acto knife. It's probably 3.5 inches long, 3 inches long, rather. I textured it with the foil ball and drew the same cobblestone pattern on it. And then I hot glued that into the roof. here you have our finished product. Thanks for sticking around, everybody. This has been a lengthy build. Funhouse is almost at completion, which means our carnival is almost finished. Next week, we'll get to part 8, the final part of our carnival, where I show you everything. The painting of the house, the games, the Ferris wheel, the carousel, all together on the table so we can see what our whole thing looks like. Also, it's that time of month again. I want to give a special shout out to my patrons over on Patreon. You guys have been great. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for sticking with me, the loyal few. That being said, if you like what I'm doing, please head on over to Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can contribute to the growth of this channel and everything behind it. It is my ultimate goal to have this become my full-time job. I would love to be 100% full-time YouTuber. This has been a lot of fun for me, and I'd love to make this my career. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about this carnival so far, how everything's coming together. Thanks for sticking around, everybody. I've been the Dungeon Mattster. Till next time.